It was the end of the 2006 Formula One season. Michael Schumacher, the most successful driver the sport had ever seen, stepped away from Ferrari. He announced his retirement.
This is going to be my last Monza race I'm going to do. At the end of this year, I've decided together with the team that I'm going to retire from racing. It has been an exceptional, really exceptional time. What motorsport in more than 30 years has given to me.
The public explanation was simple. He wanted to spend more time with his family. The official narrative was that he had already achieved everything there was to achieve. But beneath that story was another reality. Schumacher wasn't leaving because he had run out of goals. He was leaving because the spark that once defined Ferrari had disappeared. The team he had spent 10 years turning into an unstoppable force was no longer the same. The internal power struggles had returned. Their technical advantage had slipped away. He hadn't won a world championship in 2 seasons, so he chose to walk away. When Schumacher eventually made his Formula One comeback, he didn't return to Ferrari. Instead, he signed with Mercedes. What Schumacher recognized in 2006 was something the rest of Formula One would only understand years later. Ferrari isn't simply a racing team. It's a machine capable of wearing down even the greatest drivers the sport has ever produced. Over the next 2 decades, Ferrari would continue attracting the biggest names in Formula One. Alain Prost, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, each one arrived believing they could bring Ferrari back to championship glory. Instead, every one of them left disappointed, until Lewis Hamilton. This is the story of one of the most demanding environments in all of motorsport. It's the story of why some of the most gifted drivers on the planet repeatedly fell short the moment they put on Ferrari red. It's a story shaped by impossible expectations, relentless internal pressure, and a culture where the driver is often blamed long before anyone questions the car itself. But above all, it's the story of the one driver who finally understood how to break that cycle. When Lewis Hamilton announced he was leaving Mercedes to join Ferrari, much of the Formula One world called it career suicide. Critics said he was too old. They argued he was stepping into the same trap that had already defeated younger world champions at the peak of their careers. But Hamilton didn't simply survive at Ferrari. He reshaped the team from within. He achieved what Alain Prost couldn't. He accomplished what Fernando Alonso couldn't. He succeeded where even Michael Schumacher eventually decided to walk away. Because while everyone else focused on adapting themselves to Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton realized that Ferrari itself had to change first. To appreciate what Hamilton accomplished, you first have to understand the history he was stepping into. Start with Alain Prost, a 3-time world champion when he arrived at Ferrari. Calm, analytical, and widely regarded as one of the sharpest minds on the Formula One grid. Within just 2 years, the atmosphere inside Ferrari had become so toxic that Alain Prost publicly compared the car to a truck. Ferrari responded by firing him before the season was even over. Then there's Fernando Alonso. He joined Ferrari as a 2-time world champion and was widely regarded as the finest driver of his generation. Despite driving cars that weren't truly championship material, he carried Ferrari into title battles in both 2010 and 2012, only to lose the championship at the final race each time. After 5 years of constant internal tension and promises that never became reality, Alonso walked away without a single world championship for Ferrari. Not because he lacked the talent, but because the team never consistently gave him a car capable of winning. Then came Sebastian Vettel, a 4-time consecutive world champion with Red Bull. He arrived at Ferrari with one clear ambition: to follow in Michael Schumacher's footsteps. 5 years later, Ferrari chose not to extend his contract, reportedly offering a new deal with a major salary reduction. Vettel turned it down. The partnership ended before the next season even began. By the time he left, he looked nothing like the confident champion who had first arrived in Maranello. The pattern is impossible to ignore. Ferrari doesn't simply miss out on championships. It slowly chips away at the confidence, reputation, and legacy of the very drivers brought in to restore its success. Before we explore how Lewis Hamilton finally broke that cycle, it's worth understanding just how remarkable the changes he made, both technically and culturally, really were. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe. This channel is for people who want to understand Formula One beyond the headlines, not just the highlights, not just the popular opinions, the real stories behind the sport. and there are plenty more on the way that you won't want to miss. So why does this keep happening? What is the root cause of Ferrari's repeated struggles? The answer lies in a cultural mindset that goes far deeper than race strategy or engineering. At teams like Mercedes and Red Bull, the car is viewed as a tool, and the driver is the one using it. If that tool isn't working properly, the engineers focus on fixing it. Driver feedback is treated as valuable technical information. Ferrari has traditionally approached things differently. The car represents decades of history, pride, and identity. There has long been an unspoken belief that a Ferrari is already something special, and if it isn't winning, then the driver simply isn't unlocking everything the car is capable of. That mindset creates an environment where engineers hesitate to make bold changes. Driver feedback gets filtered through layers of internal politics. Meanwhile, the relentless pressure from the Italian media turns every mistake into a national controversy. And when results don't come, the blame usually falls on the driver, before anyone seriously questions the machine itself. Michael Schumacher managed to overcome this problem for a time during the early 2000s. But he never did it alone. Schumacher didn't achieve it on his own. He brought Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, and Jean Todt with him. Together, they built a leadership structure that shielded the racing team from the political battles taking place behind the scenes. They created an environment centered on technical excellence, protecting it from the emotional turbulence that had long surrounded Ferrari. But once Schumacher left, that foundation slowly disappeared. The structure they had built fell apart, and before long, Ferrari slipped back into its old habits. That was the team Lewis Hamilton inherited. At first, his experience looked no different from the champions who had come before him. He suffered 3 consecutive Q1 eliminations. Over the team radio, Hamilton even described himself as absolutely useless. The media quickly concluded that his career at the top was over. What they couldn't see was everything happening behind the scenes. Hamilton recognized almost immediately that simply driving the car harder wasn't going to solve Ferrari's problems. The system itself needed to change. He began with the braking system. Ferrari had relied on the same braking philosophy and supplier for years. Hamilton told the engineers that the brake feel simply wasn't suited to the demands of the modern, heavier ground effect cars. According to him, the braking performance felt inconsistent, almost like a lottery from one race weekend to the next. Most drivers in that position would have been expected to adjust. Fernando Alonso was expected to adapt. Sebastian Vettel was expected to adapt. Lewis Hamilton refused. Using the influence that came with being a 7-time world champion, he pushed Ferrari to completely rethink its braking system. It wasn't an easy decision internally. There was significant resistance before the team finally agreed to make the change. By 2026, even his teammate Charles Leclerc had adopted Hamilton's preferred brake specification. Then Hamilton turned his attention to the steering wheel. He requested a complete redesign of the interface, making it cleaner, more intuitive, and much closer to the system he had spent over a decade using at Mercedes. Ferrari delivered exactly that, but Hamilton wasn't simply asking for new parts. He was changing the way Ferrari approached development. He encouraged the engineers to treat driver feedback as the foundation of the process, rather than something considered afterward. Several engineers later described him as the most accurate and detailed communicator they had ever worked with. He never settled for saying the car just felt slow. Instead, he provided precise technical feedback, explaining suspension behavior, patterns of tire degradation, and the car's aerodynamic balance in remarkable detail. In many ways, he brought the analytical mindset that defined Mercedes into the emotionally charged culture of Ferrari. And eventually, those changes began to show on track. By the middle of his second season, Lewis Hamilton claimed his first Grand Prix victory as a Ferrari driver. It wasn't a lucky victory. It wasn't one of those races where the competition simply dropped out. It was a measured, commanding performance in a Ferrari that Hamilton had spent the previous 18 months reshaping from within. He had accomplished what so many believed could never be done. During Hamilton's difficult first season, Alain Prost publicly defended him, insisting that his talent hadn't disappeared. Prost understood that reality better than almost anyone. He had experienced Ferrari's unique pressures firsthand, and he recognized that Hamilton was taking a completely different approach. Michael Schumacher once said that no driver could recreate what he had built at Ferrari. In the end, he walked away after deciding the team could no longer be repaired from the inside. Lewis Hamilton made the opposite choice. He entered the very same environment that had worn down Alain Prost, Fernando Alonso, and Sebastian Vettel. He faced the same criticism, the same relentless media scrutiny, the same resistance from within the team. But instead of letting Ferrari change him, he changed Ferrari. For years, Ferrari had broken every world champion who came through its doors. Then Lewis Hamilton showed them what it truly takes to win.